ingredients that you can't pronounce and therefore you don't want to ingest into your body, well, then you've most likely come across the names of several ingredients that, perhaps unbeknownst to you, are actually made using nanotechnology. Specifically, they're made through a process which converts things like silver, copper, gold, aluminum, silicon, carbon, as well as different metal oxides into tiny, tiny, tiny atom-sized particles that are quite literally 1/1,000,000th of a meter in size. If you want a visual for how small that is, up on screen is a graph from the National Center for Electron Microscopy, and it shows you how a strand of DNA, which is about 2 nanometers in diameter, is about 1,000 times smaller than a bacteria organism and about 1,000,000 times smaller than a raindrop. So that is to say, these nanoparticles in our food are very, very small. Now, some of the more common nano-sized ingredients that you might be able to find in your cupboard right now, if you were to look, include things like titanium dioxide, which is used to increase the whiteness of things like milk, yogurt, and sugar. You might find silicon oxide, which is added as an anti-caking agent. You might find iron and zinc dioxides, which are added to increase supposed nutritional value. You might find different silver derivatives, which are added for sterilizing properties. And you might find a host of other ingredients like calcium carbonate, tricalcium phosphates, and so on and so forth. The list is rather long. However, before we move on, in order to really set the stage for you properly here, let me back up for a quick moment and actually explain to you what this is all about. Starting back in the 1990s, so about 30 full years ago, nanotechnology became widely used in the production of food products. That's because scientists discovered that by adding these tiny little components, they were able to make our food more colorful, they were able to make it brighter, creamier, crunchier, and they were even able to keep it fresher for longer. And besides just adding it to the food itself, well, some manufacturers have also added these nanoparticles to the food packaging. As just one example, up on screen you can see a milk carton which utilizes nanotechnology to act essentially as an indicator of the freshness of the milk that's inside. And as you can see, the color of the box actually changes to coincide with the change of the food that's inside. Furthermore, different researchers also found that adding these nano-sized additives to some medicines made them more effective. However, according to more and more consumer protection groups as well as different health experts, well, there appears to be a catch, which is that while these nanoparticles can provide a myriad of benefits, they might come at a price. And that price is our health. Because you see, these particles are so small, so tiny, that studies like this one here that you can see up on screen for yourself show that they can actually breach the blood-brain barrier. And the ironic part is that the researchers in that study, they were actually looking into this function of nanoparticles in order to treat neurological diseases. Because in order to treat them, they actually need medication that can breach the blood-brain barrier. But when it comes to food, for instance, when it comes to your breakfast cereal, that is not a feature of the ingredients that anyone is looking for. Furthermore, besides breaching the blood-brain barrier, other studies have shown that these particles are also able to circulate throughout the body, to get into and get absorbed by the bloodstream and different organs. They have the potential to penetrate our cell walls, and then they might also, at least potentially, create inflammation and disease. Here's, for instance, what Dr. George Pirgiotakis, who is a researcher with the Harvard School for Public Health, here's what he said regarding this matter, quote, "They may pass through the lining of the gut and enter the bloodstream, which may trigger an inflammatory or immune response. They may also build up in various parts of the body, including the lungs, the heart, and reproductive organs." Likewise, Dr. Rolf Halden, who is the director of the Center for Environmental Health Engineering over at Arizona State University, he was quoted in a recent article as saying this, quote, "We really don't know what the impact of these particles is. Human exposure is increasing, and we lack the tools to even measure what is arriving in our bodies, where it is deposited, and what it does there." Then he actually went on to compare this unknown impact of nanoparticles to asbestos. Quote, "Asbestos itself is relatively benign. It's an inorganic material. What makes it toxic and makes it kill 90,000 people a year is that it has particles that lodges in human tissue." Furthermore, there was a study published in July of 2020 by researchers over at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And in the study, they were specifically researching the effects of titanium dioxide, which is one of the most well-known additives. It's commonly added to things like gum, candy, drinks, milk, desserts, and so on. And what these researchers did was that they gave titanium dioxide to 2 different groups of mice. And in order to isolate the effects specifically to this nanoparticle, one group of mice was fed a low-fat diet and the other group was fed a high-fat diet. And what wound up happening was that both groups experienced changes in their gut bacteria, including the inflammation of their colons, which can lead to abdominal pain and even diarrhea. And although both sets of mice experienced this inflammation, the obese mice that were fed the higher fat diet, they had more pronounced symptoms.